She had been counting down the minutes until 1700 hours when she could finally leave the cramped training facility. Emily Chun wiped the sweat from her forehead as she packed her gear. Just another civilian contractor finishing another mundane day of administrative training. The last thing she expected was for Master Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison to approach her with his prized Barrett M82 sniper rifle, press it into her hands with trembling fingers, and whisper urgently, "Keep this safe. Trust no one. I'll be back for it." Before she could ask a single question, he had vanished into the Virginia shadows, leaving her holding a weapon worth more than her annual salary and a mystery that would change everything she thought she knew about herself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning fog clung to the Chesapeake Bay as Emily Chun's Honda Civic crunched across the gravel parking lot of the Joint Expeditionary Base Little Creek Training Annex. At 29, she possessed the unremarkable appearance that served her well in her role as a civilian administrative coordinator. Average height, shoulder-length black hair usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, and wire-rimmed glasses that she pushed up her nose when concentrating. Her colleagues at Peterson and Associates Government Consulting barely noticed her coming and going, which was exactly how Emily preferred it. The security checkpoint guard, Sergeant Torres, barely glanced up from his morning newspaper as Emily swiped her contractor badge. She had been making this same commute for 18 months, arriving precisely at 0730 hours for her shift coordinating training schedules and equipment logistics. Her clearance was basic, her responsibilities mundane, and her interactions with military personnel limited to scheduling conflicts and supply requisitions. Building C7 housed the administrative offices for the Naval Special Warfare Training Programs. Emily's desk sat in a corner of the main office, surrounded by filing cabinets and outdated computer equipment. Her workspace was meticulously organized, every pen its designated holder, every document filed with mathematical precision. The only personal item was a small succulent plant that somehow thrived despite the fluorescent lighting, and recycled AirDot Commander Patricia Walsh, the facility's training coordinator, appreciated Emily's efficiency but treated her as little more than a well-functioning piece of office equipment. Walsh would drop scheduling changes on Emily's desk without so much as a greeting, confident that the adjustments would be processed accurately and without complaint. Emily had learned to anticipate these requests, often having alternative arrangements prepared before Walsh realized changes were necessary. The training facility operated on strict schedules. Combat diving courses ran Tuesday through Thursday. Advanced weapons training filled weekend slots. Maritime assault simulations occupied the larger bay areas on alternating weeks. Emily coordinated it all from her corner desk, tracking equipment usage, personnel assignments, and facility maintenance with quiet competence. Her typical morning began with reviewing overnight reports. Equipment malfunctions needed immediate attention to avoid disrupting training schedules. Personnel changes required careful rearrangement of class rosters and instructor assignments. Safety incident reports demanded prompt filing with multiple oversight agencies. Emily processed these requirements with mechanical efficiency, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she updated databases and generated reports. The facility buzzed with activity as training teams arrived for their 0900 sessions. Navy SEALs, Marine Force recon operators, and Coast Guard rescue swimmers moved through the corridors with purposeful intensity. They wore their confidence like armor. These elite warriors who had earned their places through trials Emily could barely imagine. Their conversations carried fragments of classified operations, exotic deployment locations, and technical discussions about equipment she had only seen in inventory lists. Emily observed them from her peripheral vision, cataloging details with unconscious precision. Lieutenant Marcus Webb favored his left shoulder, likely compensating for an old injury. Petty Officer Sarah Blake consistently carried her gear bag slung on her right side, suggesting left-hand dominance. Master Chief Jake Morrison moved with the fluid economy of motion that marked truly elite operators, his presence commanding respect without apparent effort. These observations were habitual rather than intentional. Emily's mind automatically processed patterns, distances, and behavioral tells with the same efficiency she applied to spreadsheets and scheduling matrices. She never consciously acknowledged this tendency, treating it as simply another aspect of her analytical nature. The morning progressed through its familiar rhythm. Emily fielded phone calls from frustrated instructors whose classroom assignments had been double-booked. She coordinated equipment transfers between training bays. She updated personnel files with new certifications and medical clearances. Her interactions remained professional and minimal, rarely extending beyond the basic exchange of information required for task completion. Lunch break arrived at 1,200 hours. While military personnel gathered in the facility's cafeteria, Emily typically ate at her desk, using the quieter period to catch up on administrative tasks that required deeper concentration. Today she worked through a complex scheduling puzzle involving 3 overlapping training programs, each with specific equipment requirements and instructor certifications. The afternoon brought its own challenges. A medical emergency during dive training triggered protocol reviews and incident documentation. Equipment failure in the weapons bay required rapid rescheduling and alternative arrangements. A visiting delegation of foreign military observers needed escort assignments and security briefings. Emily managed each crisis with calm efficiency, her responses appearing automatic to casual observers. At 14:30 hours, Master Chief Morrison appeared at her desk carrying a thick manila folder. His presence commanded immediate attention, though Emily kept her eyes focused on her computer screen until he spoke. "Ms. Chun, I need these training records transferred to the new database system by end of business today." Emily glanced at the folder, quickly estimating its contents. At least 200 individual files requiring manual data entry and verification. The task would normally require several days of dedicated work. "Certainly, Master Chief. I'll have them ready." Morrison studied her for a moment, perhaps surprised by her confident acceptance of the seemingly impossible deadline. His gray eyes held an intensity that suggested depths Emily couldn't fathom, experiences and capabilities far removed from her administrative world. "These are sensitive personnel files. Discretion is essential." "Understood, sir." He placed the folder on her desk and departed without further comment. Emily immediately began organizing the files, developing an efficient processing sequence that would minimize errors while maximizing speed. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with mechanical precision, each entry verified and cross-referenced before advancing to the next record. The files contained standard training documentation, but Emily's analytical mind automatically noted patterns, deployment histories revealing unusual operational tempos, skill certifications suggesting specialized capabilities rarely acknowledged in official capacities, medical records indicating injuries consistent with high-risk activities never mentioned in public mission statements. These observations remained compartmentalized, filed away in her consciousness without conscious analysis. Emily had learned the value of selective awareness, understanding that some knowledge carried responsibilities she preferred to avoid. As the afternoon progressed, other personnel began departing for the day. The facility's atmosphere gradually shifted from active intensity to quiet maintenance mode. Skeleton crews remained to monitor essential systems and provide security coverage, but the training bays fell silent and the corridors emptied. Emily continued working, her concentration absolute as she processed the remaining files. Her desk lamp cast a pool of yellow light in the increasingly dim office space. The hum of ventilation systems and distant generator noise provided a steady background rhythm that helped maintain her focus. By 16:30 hours, she had completed 2/3 of the file transfers. The remaining documents represented the most complex cases, requiring additional verification steps and cross-references with multiple database systems. Emily's efficiency never wavered. Though she had been working without break for over 2 hours, Master Chief Morrison returned as the day shift ended, his approach silent despite the military boots that should have announced his presence. Emily sensed rather than heard his arrival, some subliminal awareness that made her look up from her screen. Progress report, Ms. Chun. 87% complete, Master Chief. The remaining files require additional verification protocols. I estimate completion by 17:15 hours. Morrison nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. You work efficiently. Thank you, sir. He lingered beside her desk, and Emily became aware of a subtle tension in his posture. His hands rested casually at his sides, but his eyes scanned the office with automatic vigilance. Something had changed since their earlier interaction, though Emily couldn't identify the specific shift. Miss Chun, how long have you been working here? 18 months. 4 days, sir. Do you enjoy the work? The question seemed oddly personal coming from someone who had never shown interest in her beyond task assignments. Emily paused her typing, considering her response. It's satisfying work, Master Chief. I appreciate the precision required. Precision is important in our line of work as well. Emily nodded politely, uncertain how to respond to what felt like a significant statement delivered in casual tones. Morrison continued studying her with that penetrating gray gaze, as if evaluating something beyond her administrative capabilities. You're here late most evenings. The work requires attention to detail. I prefer to complete tasks properly rather than quickly, a valuable trait. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Morrison fell silent, but didn't depart. Emily returned to her keyboard, though his continued presence made concentration difficult. The office felt smaller with his imposing figure nearby, the silence charged with unspoken meaning. At 1700 hours. Exactly, Emily saved the final file and leaned back in her chair. The task was complete, every record transferred and verified according to protocol. Morrison had remained beside her desk throughout the final 30 minutes, his presence both protective and unsettling. Finished, Master Chief. All files have been successfully transferred and verified. Excellent work. Morrison's voice carried genuine appreciation. Ms. Chen, I have an unusual request. Emily looked up, meeting his intense gaze directly for the first time. Something in his expression suggested this moment had been building throughout their interaction, that her completion of the file transfer had been a test of some kind. Yes, sir? Morrison glanced around the empty office, confirming their privacy. When he spoke again, his voice carried an urgency that made Emily's pulse quicken. I need you to stay late tonight. There's additional work that requires your particular skills. What kind of work, Master Chief? Sensitive material. Classification levels beyond your current clearance. But the nature of the task requires someone with your analytical capabilities and discretion. Emily hesitated. Accepting meant extending her workday indefinitely for unknown purposes. Declining might damage her professional relationship with one of the facility's most influential personnel. Morrison seemed to sense her uncertainty. This is voluntary, Ms. Chun, but it's important. More important than routine administrative tasks. Something in his tone suggested layers of meaning Emily couldn't parse. The rational choice was to politely decline and maintain her carefully structured routine. But curiosity overcame caution, a dangerous trait Emily usually kept firmly controlled. What would you need me to do? Morrison's expression shifted subtly, relief mixing with something that might have been approval. database analysis, pattern recognition, connecting information across multiple classified systems. I don't have clearance for classified systems. That can be arranged, temporarily. The offer represented a significant departure from Emily's carefully maintained low profile. Accessing classified information would create permanent records, connections that might draw unwanted attention to her unremarkable existence. But Morrison's intensity suggested the request carried weight beyond routine administrative support. When would this work need to be completed? Tonight, before the morning shift arrives. Emily glanced at her watch. 12 hours to complete an undefined task using unfamiliar systems. The timeline seemed impossible, but Morrison's confidence suggested he believed she could manage it. I'll need to make some phone calls. Cancel evening plans. Already taken care of. Your supervisor has been notified that you're working on a priority assignment. The revelation that Morrison had anticipated her acceptance felt both flattering and concerning. Emily realized she had been maneuvered into this position through careful planning rather than spontaneous request. Master Chief, may I ask why you selected me for this task? Morrison's gray eyes held hers steadily. Because you see patterns others miss, Miss Chun, and because I trust your discretion. With those words, Emily Chun's carefully structured world began its first subtle shift toward something far more complex and dangerous than coordinating training schedules. The classified terminal hummed to life under Emily's fingertips at 1800 hours. Its multiple security protocols requiring biometric scans and temporary clearance codes that Morrison had somehow procured within minutes. The basement level of Building C7 housed the facility's secure communication center, a sterile environment of reinforced concrete walls and electromagnetic shielding that felt worlds away from her familiar administrative office. Emily's new workstation featured 3 high-resolution monitors displaying classified databases she had never known existed. Personnel files, operational reports, equipment tracking systems, and communication logs stretched back decades, representing a vast network of information that painted a picture of military operations far more complex than anything discussed. In public briefings, Morrison had departed after ensuring her access was properly configured, leaving only cryptic instructions about identifying anomalous patterns in personnel movements and equipment. Assignments over the past 6 months. Emily began methodically, applying the same analytical approach she used for training schedules to datasets containing thousands of records. The work proved fascinating despite its mysterious nature. Emily discovered she possessed an intuitive understanding of database architecture that allowed her to navigate complex query systems with surprising efficiency. Her pattern recognition skills, honed through years of coordinating overlapping schedules and resource conflicts, translated perfectly to identifying irregularities in operational data. 2 hours into her analysis, Emily had identified 17 anomalies worth investigating further. Equipment transfers that didn't match official deployment records. Personnel assignments that violated standard rotation protocols. Communication logs showing encrypted transmissions to locations not listed in operational databases. Each discovery felt like solving a puzzle, engaging intellectual capabilities Emily hadn't realized she possessed. The secure facility operated under skeleton staffing during evening hours, but Emily gradually became aware of increased activity in adjacent areas. Heavy footsteps echoed through corridors that should have been empty. Radio chatter carried urgent tones that suggested developing situations rather than routine communications. Twice, security personnel passed her workstation with equipment Emily recognized from emergency response protocols. At 20-30 hours, her concentration was interrupted by the sound of approaching voices. Multiple personnel were moving through the secure area, their conversation growing clearer as they approached her workstation. I don't care what Morrison thinks. This is a security breach waiting to happen. Emily recognized the voice of Lieutenant Commander David Hutchinson, the facility's deputy security officer. His tone carried the sharp edge of someone accustomed to having his authority questioned. Emily had interacted with Hutchinson only briefly during her 18 months at the facility, but those encounters had been uniformly unpleasant. "Sir, the temporary clearance was properly authorized," replied a voice Emily didn't recognize. "By whom? Morrison doesn't have authority to grant classified access to civilian contractors." Emily's fingers slowed on the keyboard as she realized the conversation concerned her presence in the secure facility. She maintained focus on her screen while straining to hear the approaching discussion. The authorization came from higher up. "The chain, sir. Admiral Blackwood's office issued the clearance personally." "Blackwood?" Hutchinson's voice carried surprise mixed with frustration. What possible interest could the Admiral have in a filing clerk? Emily's cheeks burned at the dismissive description, though she forced herself to continue working. The group had stopped just outside her workstation, their voices clearly audible despite her focus on the monitors. "I don't know, sir. But the paperwork is legitimate." "Paperwork can be forged. What's she actually doing down here?" Emily heard footsteps approaching her position. She glanced up to see Hutchinson striding toward her workstation, flanked by two security personnel she didn't recognize. His expression combined suspicion with barely concealed hostility. Lieutenant Commander Hutchinson stood, 6 feet tall, with the rigid posture of someone who had never quite achieved the elite status he craved. His uniform was perfectly pressed, his insignia polished to mirror brightness, but he lacked the quiet confidence that marked truly successful officers. Emily had observed that compensation in his interactions with subordinates, his need to assert authority through volume and intimidation rather than competence. "Miss Chun, isn't it?" Hutchinson's tone was superficially polite, but carried clear undertones of challenge. "Yes, sir." Emily saved her work and turned to face him, keeping her expression neutral. "Working late tonight. I see. How unusual for administrative personnel. I was asked to complete a priority assignment, sir." "By whom?" Emily hesitated, uncertain whether Morrison's request was supposed to remain confidential. "Master Chief Morrison, sir. Morrison." Hutchinson's expression hardened. "And what exactly are you doing with classified systems you're not cleared to access?" "I have temporary clearance for this specific assignment, sir." "Temporary clearance." Hutchinson moved closer to her workstation, his eyes scanning the monitors with obvious suspicion. "Convenient. And what kind of assignment requires a civilian contractor to access personnel databases and operational records?" Emily felt trapped between conflicting loyalties. Morrison had entrusted her with important work, but Hutchinson clearly viewed her presence as a security violation. Her analytical mind quickly assessed the political dynamics at play, recognizing that she had become a pawn in some larger conflict between the two officers. "Database analysis, sir. Pattern recognition work." "Pattern recognition." Hutchinson's tone made the phrase sound absurd. "Miss Chun, do you have any background in intelligence analysis? Operational security, military planning?" "No, sir." "Then what possible qualifications do you have for analyzing classified operational data?" The question stung because Emily couldn't provide a satisfactory answer. Her qualifications were indeed limited to administrative coordination and database management. She had no formal training in intelligence analysis, no security clearance beyond basic facility access, no military experience beyond her civilian contractor role. "I work with databases and scheduling systems, sir." Master Chief Morrison felt those skills might be applicable. "Scheduling systems." Hutchinson laughed without humor. "Gentlemen, this is what passes for security protocol under Morrison's supervision. Civilian contractors accessing classified systems based on experience with scheduling software." The security personnel exchanged uncomfortable glances. clearly unwilling to participate in what was becoming a public humiliation, but unable to contradict a superior officer. Emily kept her expression carefully neutral, though her hands clenched involuntarily under the desk. "Sir, the clearance authorization," one of the security personnel began. "The clearance authorization is suspicious," Hutchinson interrupted. "Admiral Blackwood doesn't personally involve himself in minor administrative matters. Someone used his name inappropriately, and I intend to investigate." Emily realized her position was becoming untenable. If Hutchinson's suspicions proved correct, she could face serious consequences for unauthorized access to classified systems. Even if the clearance was legitimate, his hostility guaranteed an unpleasant working environment. "Perhaps I should contact Master Chief Morrison for clarification," Emily suggested. "Morrison is unavailable," Hutchinson replied curtly. "Convenient timing for his absence, wouldn't you say?" The implication was clear. Morrison had deliberately arranged to be absent during Emily's work session to avoid accountability for the security breach. Emily felt a growing sense of isolation as she realized the person who had granted her access was nowhere to be found when questions arose. "Miss Chun, I'm going to need you to step away from those terminals while I conduct a security review." "Sir, I haven't completed the assigned work." "The assigned work is suspended pending investigation." Hutchinson moved to her workstation, his intention to access her screens obvious. Emily quickly logged out of the classified systems, her training in information security, making the action automatic despite her growing frustration. Hutchinson's expression darkened at this minor act of defiance. "Attempting to conceal your activities, Miss Chun. Following proper logout procedures, sir." "Don't lecture me about proper procedures. You're a civilian contractor with no business accessing these systems in the first place." The confrontation was escalating beyond professional disagreement into personal attack. Emily recognized that Hutchinson was using her as a proxy target for his conflict with Morrison, but that understanding didn't make the situation less humiliating. "Sir, I was following instructions from authorized personnel." "Authorized by whom?" "Morrison doesn't have authority to grant classified access. Admiral Blackwood's office claims no knowledge of this arrangement. So who exactly authorized your presence here?" Emily felt the foundation of her position crumbling. If the authorization was illegitimate, she could face criminal charges for unauthorized access to classified systems. If it was legitimate but being disputed, she was caught in a political battle beyond her understanding or control. "I assumed Master Chief Morrison had proper authority, sir." "You assumed?" Hutchinson's voice carried triumph, as if her admission proved his point. "Miss Chun, in military operations, assumptions can be fatal. Security protocols exist for reasons that apparently escaped your consideration." The lecture continued for several minutes, Hutchinson using Emily's situation to demonstrate his superior understanding of security procedures to the observing personnel. Emily endured the criticism silently, recognizing that any response would only escalate the confrontation. "Furthermore," Hutchinson continued, "your presence here represents a potential intelligence breach. Civilian contractors with basic clearance should never have access to operational databases, regardless of supposed authorization from Admiral Blackwood's office." Emily's analytical mind processed the political implications of Hutchinson's attack. His emphasis on proper procedures and security protocols suggested someone seeking to establish authority through criticism of others' decisions. His questioning of Admiral Blackwood's involvement indicated either genuine concern about unauthorized activities or an attempt to challenge Morrison's influence through proxy. "Sir, should I return to my regular duties?" Emily asked, hoping to extract herself from the increasingly uncomfortable situation. "Your regular duties don't include classified database analysis," Hutchinson replied sharply. "I'm suspending your access to Building C7 secure areas pending completion of a security review." The suspension felt like professional death. Emily's entire role at the facility depended on her access to training coordination systems, most of which were housed in secure areas. Hutchinson was effectively ending her employment over this single incident. "Sir, that seems excessive, Ms. Chun. I determine what constitutes an appropriate security response, not civilian contractors who overestimate their authority." Emily realized that further protest would only worsen her situation. Hutchinson had decided to use her case as a demonstration of his security vigilance, and nothing she said would change that outcome. "Understood, sir." "Good. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings from your office. You'll surrender your facility badge and await notification regarding the investigation results." The security personnel moved forward, their expressions apologetic, but their duty clear. Emily stood slowly, her mind racing through the implications of this unexpected development. 18 months of steady employment had just ended because of her decision to accept Morrison's mysterious assignment. As they walked through the corridors toward her office, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that events were unfolding according to some plan she didn't understand. Morrison's absence during her crisis seemed too convenient to be coincidental. Hutchinson's immediate challenge to her clearance suggested he had been monitoring the situation closely. Her office felt different as she packed her few personal belongings. The desk that had been her domain for 18 months now belonged to someone else. The carefully organized filing system she had maintained would become another person's responsibility. The small succulent plant that had somehow thrived in the artificial environment would probably die within a week. "Ms. Chun," one of the security personnel said quietly as she gathered her belongings. "For what it's worth, Lieutenant Commander Hutchinson has been looking for ways to challenge Morrison's authority for months. This isn't really about you." The observation provided context but little comfort. Emily had become collateral damage in a political conflict she hadn't known existed. Her decision to trust Morrison's judgment had cost her the stability she had worked 18 months to achieve. As she surrendered her facility badge at the security checkpoint, Emily realized that the evening's events had fundamentally changed her relationship with the facility and everyone in it. She was no longer the invisible administrative coordinator who processed paperwork and maintained schedules. She had become a person of interest, someone whose activities warranted investigation and whose loyalties were questioned. The drive home through Virginia's dark highways gave Emily time to process what had happened. Morrison's mysterious assignment had promised temporary access to classified systems for pattern recognition work. Instead, it had cost her employment and potentially exposed her to criminal charges if the authorization proved fraudulent. But as Emily replayed the evening's events, she realized that her brief exposure to classified databases had revealed capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. The complex analytical work had felt natural, engaging her intellectual abilities in ways that administrative coordination never had. For those few hours, she had been using skills she didn't remember developing, processing information with efficiency. That surprised even her. Hutchinson's attack had been professionally devastating, but also strangely illuminating. His assumption that civilian contractors lacked qualifications for intelligence analysis was probably correct in most cases. But Emily's performance during those 2 hours suggested she might be an exception to that general rule. As her Honda Civic turned into her apartment complex's parking lot, Emily made a decision that would have significant consequences in the days ahead. She would not simply wait for the investigation's results or search for another administrative position. Instead, she would discover why Morrison had selected her for work she wasn't qualified to perform, and why her brief exposure to classified systems had felt so familiar. The answers to those questions would prove more dangerous and revelatory than Emily could possibly imagine. 3 days passed without a word from the facility. Emily spent them in her modest Chesapeake apartment, alternating between researching military personnel databases online and staring at her silent phone. Her savings account could sustain her for perhaps 2 months without employment, but the financial pressure felt secondary to the growing mystery surrounding Morrison's disappearance and her sudden termination. On Thursday morning, her phone finally rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the voice was unmistakably familiar. "Miss Chun, this is Master Chief Morrison." Emily's relief was immediate and overwhelming. "Master Chief, I've been trying to reach you." "Lieutenant Commander, Hutchinson suspended my access and I know what happened. Can you meet me at Pier 12 in Norfolk at 1400 hours? The location was public but isolated, a commercial fishing pier that would provide privacy without appearing secretive." Emily agreed immediately, desperate for answers about her situation and Morrison's 3-day absence. "Come alone. Don't mention this meeting to anyone." The line went dead before Emily could ask the dozens of questions racing through her mind. She spent the remaining hours researching Pier 12's layout and considering what Morrison might want to discuss. His tone had carried urgency mixed with caution, suggesting their meeting involved more than simple clarification of her employment status. Norfolk's commercial fishing district stretched along the Elizabeth River, its piers serving both recreational anglers and professional fishing operations. Pier 12 extended into deeper water where larger vessels could dock, but Thursday afternoon found it mostly deserted except for maintenance workers and a few dedicated fishermen. Emily arrived 15 minutes early, positioning herself near the pier's entrance where she could observe approaching vehicles. Her analytical mind automatically cataloged escape routes and potential observation points, habits she didn't remember developing but felt entirely natural. Morrison's black Ford F-150 appeared precisely at 1400 hours. He parked near the pier's maintenance building and approached on foot, his movements carrying the fluid alertness Emily had observed during his facility visits. But something had changed in his demeanor. The quiet confidence remained, but underneath lay a tension that suggested recent developments had complicated his situation significantly. "Ms. Chun, thank you for coming." "Master Chief, what happened?" "Hutchinson said the clearance authorization was suspicious, and I haven't heard from you since Tuesday night." Morrison gestured toward the pier's far end, away from the maintenance workers. They walked in silence until reaching a section where weathered wooden railings provided both privacy and a clear view of the surrounding area. "The authorization was legitimate," Morrison said finally. "Admiral Blackwood did approve your temporary clearance, but that approval was part of a larger operation that's now been compromised." Emily felt her stomach drop. "Compromised how?" "Someone leaked information about your database analysis to personnel who weren't supposed to know about it." Hutchinson's interference wasn't coincidental. The implication was clear. Emily had been deliberately targeted by someone with inside knowledge of Morrison's plans. Her termination hadn't been the result of bureaucratic oversight, but active sabotage by unknown parties. Who would want to stop the analysis? Morrison's gray eyes scanned the river before answering. "That's what we're trying to determine." "The patterns you identified in those 2 hours pointed towards something significant. Equipment diversions, personnel movements, communication irregularities that suggest coordinated activity by someone with high-level access." Emily's mind raced through the anomalies she had discovered during her brief time with the classified systems. 17 distinct irregularities that had felt like puzzle pieces waiting to be assembled into a larger picture. Someone had prevented her from completing that analysis. "Master Chief, am I in danger?" "Potentially. Your identification of those patterns made you a person of interest to whoever is behind them. Hutchinson's actions may have provided temporary protection by removing you from the investigation, but that protection won't last indefinitely." The revelation that her analytical work had uncovered genuine security threats transformed Emily's understanding of recent events. She hadn't been a pawn in bureaucratic politics, but an accidental threat to someone's carefully planned operations. "What do you need me to do?" Morrison's expression shifted, revealing something that might have been approval mixed with concern. That's the question I've been wrestling with for 3 days. Officially, you're a civilian contractor with no security clearance who shouldn't be involved in military investigations. Unofficially, you've demonstrated analytical capabilities that could be crucial to stopping whatever is being planned. Emily realized she was being offered a choice between safety and involvement in something far more dangerous than coordinating training schedules. Morrison's careful phrasing suggested he couldn't directly order her participation, but desperately needed her unique skills. What exactly did I uncover in those databases? Evidence of systematic equipment theft, coordinated by someone with access to classified inventory systems, night vision devices, communications equipment, specialized weapons components, items that could support a significant operation if assembled properly. Emily's analytical mind immediately began processing implications. Military-grade equipment theft suggested either black market sales or preparation for operations requiring advanced capabilities. The coordination necessary implied multiple participants with high-level access. How much equipment are we talking about? Enough to outfit a platoon-sized unit with state-of-the-art gear. The thefts have been occurring over 6 months, carefully spaced to avoid detection through normal inventory audits. But I detected them in 2 hours. Because you approach the data differently than traditional security protocols. Your background in scheduling and resource coordination gave you insights that pure intelligence analysts missed. Emily felt a surge of pride mixed with apprehension. Her unconventional qualifications had indeed proven valuable, but that value came with responsibilities she wasn't sure she could handle. Master Chief, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Morrison nodded, his expression serious. Do you think I'm qualified for this kind of work, or are you asking because you're desperate and I'm available? Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying the river traffic while considering his response. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone making a difficult admission. 6 months ago, I would have said you weren't qualified. Administrative coordinators don't typically transition into intelligence analysis, regardless of their analytical skills. He turned to meet her eyes directly. But watching you work Tuesday night changed my assessment. You don't just process information, Miss Chun, you understand it. You see connections and patterns that others miss, and you do it instinctively. Emily felt something shift inside her, a recognition of capabilities she had never fully acknowledged. Morrison's assessment aligned with her own experience during those hours with the classified systems, when complex analytical work had felt natural despite her lack of formal training. What would be required if I agreed to help? Unofficial consultation. On database analysis. No formal clearance, no official involvement. You would review information I provide and offer insights based on your pattern recognition abilities. And if we discover something significant, then we decide how to proceed based on what we find. Emily realized Morrison was offering her chance to discover what she was truly capable of, but at considerable personal risk. Unofficial involvement meant no legal protection if things went wrong, no institutional support if she faced consequences. The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted their conversation. Morrison's posture tensed as 3 black SUVs turned into the pier's parking area, their tinted windows and government plates immediately recognizable as official transportation. That's not good, Morrison muttered, his hand moving unconsciously toward his concealed sidearm. The SUVs parked in a formation that blocked the pier's primary exit route. 6 personnel emerged, their tactical gear and coordinated movements identifying them as elite military or federal operators. Emily felt her pulse quicken as she realized their quiet meeting had been discovered and intercepted. Master Chief Morrison, called a voice from the lead vehicle. Please remain where you are. Morrison's expression darkened as he recognized the speaker. Lieutenant Commander Hutchinson. What brings you to Norfolk? Hutchinson approached with 2 armed personnel flanking him, his earlier bureaucratic demeanor replaced by something far more threatening. Investigating unauthorized contact with suspended civilian contractors, Emily felt trapped between Morrison's protective presence and Hutchinson's advancing team. The pier's isolated location, chosen for privacy, now prevented escape from what was clearly a planned confrontation. "Miss Chun isn't under arrest," Morrison said carefully. "She's free to meet with whomever she chooses." "Not when those meetings involve discussion of classified operations," Hutchinson replied. "Miss Chun, you're wanted for questioning regarding unauthorized disclosure of classified information." Emily's mind raced. She had never disclosed classified information to anyone, but Hutchinson's accusations suggested someone had fabricated evidence to justify her detention. "I haven't disclosed anything to anyone," Emily said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Phone records indicate multiple attempts to contact foreign nationals since your suspension Tuesday evening." The accusation was absurd, but potentially effective. Emily had indeed made several phone calls since her termination, but all had been to potential employers and her apartment management company. Someone had clearly mischaracterized those communications to build a case against her. Those calls were job-related. "I can provide documentation." "Documentation can be fabricated," Hutchinson interrupted. "What can't be fabricated is your unauthorized presence at a classified facility, your access to systems beyond your clearance level, and your subsequent contact with a person of interest in an ongoing investigation." Emily realized she was being framed as part of whatever conspiracy Morrison had been investigating. Her analytical capabilities, which had uncovered evidence of equipment theft, were being recharacterized as evidence of her own criminal involvement. Morrison stepped forward, placing himself between Emily and Hutchinson's team. "Lieutenant Commander, Ms. Chun's facility access was properly authorized by Admiral Blackwood's office. Any investigation should focus on the security breaches she identified, not her qualifications to identify them. Admiral Blackwood's office has no record of authorizing civilian access to classified systems," Hutchinson replied smoothly, "which suggests someone forged that authorization using the Admiral's name." Emily watched the exchange with growing understanding. Hutchinson wasn't investigating equipment theft or unauthorized access. He was systematically eliminating the people who had discovered evidence of criminal activity. Morrison's investigation had been compromised from the beginning. "Master Chief," Emily said quietly, "this isn't about my clearance or the database analysis." Morrison's eyes met hers, and she saw recognition there. He understood what she had realized. Hutchinson wasn't investigating the equipment theft because he was involved in organizing it. "Miss Chun, I'm going to need you to come with us for formal questioning," Hutchinson announced, signaling his team to advance. Morrison's response was immediate and decisive. He stepped forward, his Navy SEAL training evident in the fluid economy of motion that brought him within striking distance of Hutchinson before the lieutenant commander could react. "I don't think that's going to happen." The confrontation erupted into violence with shocking suddenness. Morrison's first strike disabled Hutchinson's sidearm while simultaneously positioning him as a human shield against the advancing team. Emily found herself pressed against the pier's railing as the two groups engaged in close-quarters combat. Morrison's skills were immediately apparent. Despite being outnumbered 3-1, his military training and operational experience gave him decisive advantages in the confined space of the pier. His opponents were clearly professional, but lacked his combat veteran status. Emily watched in fascination and terror as Morrison systematically neutralized each threat while protecting her position. His movements were precise, economical, and utterly ruthless when necessary. This was the elite operator whose reputation had earned him command respect. Now operating at full capability, the engagement lasted less than 2 minutes. When it ended, Hutchinson's team was disabled or retreating, and Morrison was breathing hard but uninjured. Hutchinson himself lay unconscious near the pier's edge, his carefully pressed uniform torn and bloodied. "Miss Chun, we need to leave." "Now." Emily's legs felt unsteady as adrenaline coursed through her system. The academic concept of military combat had just become visceral reality, leaving her shaken but strangely exhilarated. "Where do we go?" Morrison was already moving toward his truck, his eyes scanning for additional threats. "Somewhere safe while we figure out who else is involved in this conspiracy." As they reached his vehicle, Morrison paused and turned to face her directly. "Miss Chun, everything changes from this point forward. If you come with me, you'll be classified as a fugitive from federal investigation. If you stay here, you'll probably be arrested on fabricated charges." Emily looked back at the pier where Hutchinson's unconscious form was being attended by his remaining personnel. Her choice was between uncertain freedom with Morrison or certain imprisonment with people who had just tried to kidnap her. "Let's go." Morrison's truck roared to life, and they departed the pier at high speed, leaving behind Emily's carefully structured civilian life and entering a world of hidden operations and deadly conspiracies that would test every analytical skill she possessed. Morrison's safe house sat hidden among the pine forests of rural Virginia, a nondescript cabin that appeared abandoned from the outside but contained sophisticated communications equipment and defensive preparations that spoke to careful planning. Emily spent her first night there processing the reality that she had become a fugitive from federal investigation based on her accidental discovery of military equipment theft. The cabin's interior revealed Morrison's dual nature. Comfortable furniture and a well-stocked kitchen suggested long-term preparation for extended stays, while tactical gear and weapon storage indicated readiness for violent confrontation. Emily found herself cataloging these details with the same analytical precision she had applied to training schedules, her mind automatically assessing the strategic implications of their defensive position. Morrison worked through the night establishing secure communications with contacts Emily didn't know existed. His conversations were brief and coded, but she gathered that Hutchinson's attempted arrest had triggered broader security alerts throughout the military command structure. Whatever conspiracy they had uncovered was moving into active phases that demanded immediate response. Friday morning brought unwelcome news. Morrison's encrypted phone displayed a priority message that made his expression darken as he read. "What is it?" Emily asked, setting down her coffee cup. "Admiral Blackwood was found dead in his Pentagon office 3 hours ago. Apparent heart attack, but the timing is suspicious." Emily felt the floor shift beneath her understanding. Admiral Blackwood had authorized her classified access, making him a key witness to the legitimacy of Morrison's investigation. His death eliminated that testimony and left them without institutional protection. "Do you think they killed him?" "I think someone is cleaning up loose ends very efficiently," Morrison replied grimly. "Blackwood's death makes us the only witnesses to his authorization of your clearance. Without his testimony, Hutchinson's version becomes the official record." Emily realized their situation had deteriorated from politically complicated to genuinely life-threatening. Someone with significant resources and high-level access was systematically eliminating evidence and witnesses related to the equipment theft operation. "Master Chief, how did you first discover the equipment discrepancies?" Morrison leaned back in his chair, considering how much operational detail to share with a civilian contractor who had accidentally become his only ally. 6 weeks ago, a Navy SEAL team reported equipment failures during a training exercise. Night vision devices that malfunctioned, communications gear that couldn't maintain secure frequencies, weapons accessories that didn't meet specifications. When I investigated, I discovered the failed equipment had been replaced with inferior substitutes. Emily's analytical mind immediately began processing implications. Someone was stealing military equipment and replacing it with non-functional duplicates to delay detection. Exactly. The substitution scheme was sophisticated, requiring detailed knowledge of equipment specifications and access to supply chain documentation. Not something that could be accomplished by individual thieves or external criminals. Inside job. Multiple participants with high-level clearances. Morrison nodded grimly. And when I started investigating personnel with the necessary access, Hutchinson's name appeared repeatedly in connection with equipment transfers and inventory discrepancies. Emily understood why Morrison had sought her analytical capabilities. Traditional military investigations would focus on individual incidents, rather than systematic patterns across multiple databases. Her background in coordinating complex schedules and resource allocations had given her exactly the perspective needed to identify the conspiracy scope. How much equipment was stolen? Based on your preliminary analysis, approximately $3.20 million worth of specialized gear over 6 months. Enough to outfit a significant operation requiring state-of-the-art capabilities. Emily felt a chill as she considered what kind of operations would require that level of equipment theft. Military-grade night vision, secure communications, and specialized weapons suggested preparations for activities far beyond simple black market sales. Morrison's phone buzzed with an incoming encrypted message. His expression grew increasingly grim as he read, "We've got bigger problems. Federal authorities issued arrest warrants for both of us this morning. Charges include theft of classified materials, conspiracy to commit espionage, and violation of the Espionage Act." Emily's hands trembled as the implications hit her. Federal espionage charges carried potential life sentences or even capital punishment. Someone was using the full weight of the federal justice system to eliminate them as threats to the conspiracy. How do we prove our innocence? We don't prove innocence. We prove the conspiracy exists and identify everyone involved before they can complete whatever operation they're planning. Morrison's phone rang, the caller ID showing only encrypted numbers. He answered cautiously. Morrison. Emily watched his expression change as he listened to the caller. Something in the conversation was significant, but Morrison's responses remained carefully neutral. Understood. Location and timing? After ending the call, Morrison turned to Emily with an expression that combined opportunity with grave risk. That was Lieutenant Sarah Martinez from SEAL Team 6. She's been conducting her own investigation into equipment irregularities and wants to meet with us. Emily felt hope for the first time since fleeing the pier. An active-duty SEAL officer could provide institutional credibility and resources they desperately needed. Can we trust her? Martinez has an impeccable record and no connection to Hutchinson's activities. If anyone in the command structure can be trusted, it's her. Where does she want to meet? Morrison's expression grew troubled. That's the problematic part. She wants to meet at the Joint Expeditionary Base Little Creek Training Facility. Building C7, specifically. Emily felt her stomach drop. Building C7 was where this entire crisis had begun, where Hutchinson had terminated her access and initiated the investigation that had led to their current fugitive status. That seems like walking into a trap. It could be, but Martinez claims she has evidence that will prove the conspiracy exists and identify everyone involved. Evidence she can't transmit electronically because she doesn't know who might be monitoring communications. Emily's analytical mind weighed the risks and benefits. Meeting Martinez offered their best chance of clearing their names and stopping the conspiracy. But returning to the facility where Hutchinson commanded significant influence seemed suicidal. What kind of evidence could she have? She didn't specify, but she mentioned discovering financial records that traced the stolen equipment to its ultimate destination. Emily realized that financial documentation would provide exactly the proof they needed to expose the conspiracy's scope and participants. Bank records, payment authorizations, and fund transfers would create an evidentiary trail that courts could follow. When does she want to meet? Tonight at 2,200 hours. After the facility transitions to minimal staffing levels, Emily felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. Accepting Martinez's invitation meant risking capture by federal authorities, actively searching for them. Declining meant remaining fugitives without hope of proving their innocence. Master Chief, what's your assessment? Morrison was quiet for several minutes, his gray eyes focused on some middle distance as he weighed factors Emily couldn't fully appreciate. Martinez's record suggests she's trustworthy, but this situation has shown that records can be deceiving. Hutchinson appeared to be a competent security officer until he tried to kidnap you yesterday. But we need allies if we're going to stop this conspiracy. We do, and Martinez represents our best chance of finding institutional support. Emily made her decision with the same analytical approach she applied to complex scheduling problems. The risks of meeting Martinez were significant, but quantifiable. The risks of remaining isolated fugitives were open-ended and potentially fatal. I think we should go. Morrison nodded slowly. I was hoping you'd say that, because I reached the same conclusion. But Ms. Chen, you need to understand what we're walking into. If this is a trap, we probably won't survive it. And if we don't go, the conspiracy continues and innocent people die. Possibly many innocent people, based on the scale of equipment theft we've documented. Emily felt something crystallize within her, a recognition that her analytical capabilities came with moral responsibilities she couldn't ignore. The patterns she had identified weren't abstract data points, but evidence of criminal activity that threatened national security. What do we need to do to prepare? Morrison's expression shifted into the focused intensity Emily had observed during his confrontation with Hutchinson's team. This was the elite operator beginning mission planning, applying decades of experience to a high-risk infiltration. First, we assume the meeting is compromised and plan accordingly. Second, we prepare multiple escape routes and backup communications. Third, we document everything we know in case we don't survive to testify. Over the next several hours, Morrison transformed the safe house into a mission planning center. He produced detailed facility blueprints, communications equipment, and tactical gear that Emily was surprised to see included items sized for her use. You plan for this possibility, Emily observed, examining body armor that appeared to be exactly her size. I planned for multiple possibilities. Your involvement was always going to put you at risk, so I prepared accordingly. Emily realized Morrison had been manipulating events since their first meeting, carefully positioning her for involvement in his investigation while preparing for the consequences that involvement would bring. She should have felt betrayed, but instead she felt oddly honored that someone of his capabilities had considered her worth such careful preparation. The equipment theft we uncovered, Emily said as she adjusted the unfamiliar weight of tactical gear. What do you think it's being used for? Morrison paused in his own preparations, considering how much of his analysis to share. The equipment profile suggests preparation for a high-value target operation requiring stealth insertion and precision engagement. Night vision for movement. In darkness, secure communications for coordination, specialized weapons for accurate elimination of specific individuals. Emily felt cold understanding wash over her. Assassination operation. That's my assessment. Someone is using stolen military equipment to prepare for killing someone important enough to justify this level of risk and preparation. Who? Unknown. But the target would have to be significant enough to justify stealing $3.2 million worth of equipment and murdering a Navy admiral to cover the trail. Emily's mind raced through possibilities. Political figures, military commanders, foreign dignitaries, corporate executives. Any number of high-value targets could justify such elaborate preparation. Do we know when this operation is supposed to take place? Martinez's intelligence might answer that question. If her evidence includes operational timelines, we'll know how much time we have to stop it. As evening approached, Morrison completed his final preparations. He had equipped them both with communications gear, night vision devices, and weapons Emily hoped they wouldn't need to use. The irony wasn't lost on her that they were using military equipment to investigate the theft of military equipment. Ms. Chun, once we leave this cabin, we're committed to whatever happens tonight. Are you certain you want to proceed? Emily looked around the safe house that had provided temporary refuge from the chaos her life had become. Returning to that chaos meant accepting responsibilities she had never sought and risks she wasn't trained to handle. But the alternative was allowing a conspiracy to proceed unopposed, knowing that her analytical capabilities might be the key to stopping whatever operation was being planned with stolen military equipment. I'm certain. Morrison's truck departed the safe house at 20:30 hours, its headlights cutting through Virginia darkness as they drove toward a confrontation that would determine whether Emily Chun remained a fugitive civilian contractor or became something far more dangerous and necessary. The woman who had once fixed training schedules was about to discover what she could accomplish when the stakes involved life, death, and national security. The Joint Expeditionary Base Little Creek appeared ghostly under the quarter moon, its familiar buildings transformed into threatening shadows by Emily's new perspective as a fugitive. Morrison parked his truck a half-mile from the facilities perimeter, hidden among the scrub pines that bordered the training complex. The same guard gates Emily had passed through daily for 18 months now represented checkpoints manned by personnel who might arrest her on sight. Morrison's infiltration plan relied on Emily's intimate knowledge of the facility's layout and security protocols. Her 18 months of administrative work had given her detailed understanding of patrol schedules, camera coverage, and electronic security systems that even Morrison's SEAL training couldn't match. For the first time since this crisis began, Emily's civilian background provided advantages over military expertise. Security rotation changes at 2,130 hours, Emily whispered as they observed the facility from their concealed position. The northeast perimeter has a 12-minute gap in camera coverage while guards transition between sectors. Morrison studied the facility through night vision binoculars, his expression focused but relaxed. This was his natural environment, the kind of high-risk infiltration that had defined his military career. Emily felt simultaneously comforted by his expertise and terrified by the necessity for it. Building C7's rear entrance uses card readers, but the system goes to backup power between 2,200 and 2,230 hours for scheduled maintenance, Emily continued. During that window, the magnetic locks default to mechanical backups that can be bypassed. With basic tools. Excellent intelligence, Morrison acknowledged. Your knowledge of this facility's vulnerabilities is more detailed than most classified security assessments. Emily realized that her obsessive attention to administrative details had inadvertently made her an expert on facility security. 18 months of coordinating maintenance schedules and equipment rotations had taught her exactly when and where the base was most vulnerable to infiltration. At 2,145 hours, they began their approach. Morrison moved with the fluid silence of elite military training, while Emily discovered that her analytical mind translated surprisingly well to tactical movement. Her ability to process multiple variables simultaneously helped her navigate the complex terrain of security sensors. Patrol routes. The infiltration proceeded flawlessly until they reached Building C7's rear entrance. Morrison was preparing to bypass the mechanical locks when Emily noticed something that made her freeze with sudden understanding. Master Chief, stop. Morrison's hand stilled on the lock mechanism, his training making him instantly responsive to warnings from his partner. What is it? Emily studied the entrance more carefully, her administrative knowledge revealing details that Morrison's tactical focus had missed. The maintenance window I mentioned, it was changed 2 weeks ago. New schedule puts system backup at 0200 hours. not 2,200. Morrison's expression darkened as he processed the implications, which means the electronic locks are fully active right now, and any attempt to bypass them will trigger security alerts. They had walked into exactly the kind of trap Emily had feared. Someone with detailed knowledge of her administrative background had anticipated her intelligence about facility vulnerabilities and modified security protocols accordingly. Martinez's meeting was indeed a setup, but not in the way they had expected. "We need to abort," Morrison whispered, already beginning to withdraw from the entrance. Emily's analytical mind raced through alternatives. Aborting meant losing their only chance to obtain Martinez's evidence, but proceeding meant certain capture. Unless there was a third option her administrative knowledge could provide. "There's another way into Building C7, Emily said quietly. "Service tunnel from the utility building. It's not part of the electronic security grid, because it's classified as infrastructure access rather than facility entry." Morrison's eyes brightened with professional appreciation. "Show me." The service tunnel dated from the facility's original construction, a cramped concrete passage designed for maintenance access to Building C7's basement systems. Emily had discovered it while researching HVAC maintenance schedules, but had never considered its tactical applications until this moment. The tunnel's entrance was hidden behind industrial equipment in the utility building's sub-basement. Morrison examined the access hatch with growing satisfaction. "This isn't on any security schematic I've seen. How did you know about it?" "Maintenance request forms. I had to coordinate repairs to the ventilation system last winter, and the work orders reference this access point." Emily's administrative obsession with complete documentation had revealed infiltration routes that sophisticated military planning had missed. Morrison worked quickly to open the access hatch, his tools making minimal noise as he circumvented the simple mechanical lock. The tunnel itself was barely wide enough for single-file movement, its concrete walls slick with condensation and decades of accumulated grime. Emily found herself leading the way because her knowledge of the building's layout was more detailed than Morrison's, a reversal of their usual dynamic that felt both empowering and terrifying. After 20 minutes of claustrophobic movement through absolute darkness, they reached the tunnel's terminus in Building C7's basement. Emily's memory of maintenance documentation guided them through a maze of mechanical equipment to a service stairwell that provided access to the building's upper levels. Martinez wanted to meet in Conference Room B on the 3rd floor, Morrison whispered as they reached the stairwell. Emily's administrative knowledge immediately flagged a problem. Conference Room B was converted to storage space 8 months ago. If Martinez specified that location, she either doesn't know about the change or she's deliberately directing us to the wrong place. Morrison's expression grew grim. Or someone else is using her name and doesn't have current facility information. The possibility that Martinez was already compromised added another layer of danger to their mission. They could be walking into a confrontation with hostile forces who had eliminated Martinez and assumed her identity to lure them into a trap. "What's the current layout of the 3rd floor?" Morrison asked. Emily closed her eyes, visualizing the floor plan from memory. Conference Room B is now Equipment Storage 7. Conference Room A was relocated to the North Corridor. The Communications Center occupies the southeast corner. Security Office is centrally located with sightlines to all primary access points. Morrison processed this information with tactical efficiency. If someone is using Martinez's identity, they'll probably position themselves in Equipment Storage 7 to maintain the deception. If it's actually Martinez, she'd be in one of the conference rooms or the communication center. Emily realized they needed to determine Martinez's true status before committing to any meeting location. Her analytical mind proposed a solution that combined her administrative knowledge with Morrison's tactical expertise. The communication center has internal monitoring capability. If we can access those systems, we can observe the third floor without exposing ourselves to direct confrontation. Can you operate military communications equipment? Emily hesitated, then realized her database experience might translate to more complex systems than she had previously considered. The interfaces are probably similar to the classified systems I worked with Tuesday night. I can try. They ascended to the third floor with extreme caution, Morrison's military training evident in his movement discipline and threat assessment. Emily found herself unconsciously mimicking his techniques, her civilian background adapting to tactical requirements with surprising effectiveness. The communications center was secured by electronic locks that Morrison bypassed with tools Emily hadn't known existed. Inside, banks of monitoring equipment provided visual and audio surveillance of the entire facility. Emily studied the control interfaces with growing confidence. They were indeed similar to the classified database systems she had mastered with such unexpected ease. Within minutes, she had accessed the internal security cameras and was scanning the third floor for signs of Martinez or hostile forces. What she discovered made her blood run cold. "Master Chief, look at this." Morrison leaned over her shoulder to study the security monitor. Equipment storage 7. The former conference room contained sophisticated communications equipment and what appeared to be a mobile command center. Multiple personnel in tactical gear were positioned throughout the room, their equipment and positioning suggesting they were prepared for armed confrontation. "That's not Martinez," Morrison observed grimly. Emily switched to audio monitoring and immediately picked up radio communications that confirmed their worst fears. Subjects should arrive within the next 15 minutes. All teams maintain position until they're inside the kill zone. Copy that. Teams 2 and 3 are in overwatch positions covering all exits. Remember, we need the woman alive for interrogation. Morrison is expendable. Emily felt ice form in her stomach as she realized the scope of the trap. Multiple tactical teams were positioned throughout Building C7, all waiting for their arrival. Someone had used Martinez's name to lure them into a carefully planned ambush. "We need to get out of here immediately," Morrison whispered. Emily continued monitoring communications, her analytical mind processing tactical information with a growing understanding of their situation. "There's more," she said quietly. "Listen to this." She adjusted the monitoring equipment to pick up a different frequency, where a conversation was taking place that made the conspiracy's scope suddenly clear. "Phase 1 equipment delivery is complete. All stolen items have been transferred to the primary staging area. Confirmed. Phase 2 personnel are in position at the target location. Phase 3 begins at 0600 hours tomorrow, the Senator's morning. Routine provides optimal engagement opportunities." Emily and Morrison exchanged glances of horror as they realized what they had uncovered. The equipment theft had been preparation for an assassination attempt against a U.S. senator scheduled to take place in less than 8 hours. "Which senator?" Emily whispered, her fingers flying across the monitoring controls to gather more intelligence. "Senator Catherine Westbrook," came the answer from the radio communication. "Her morning jog through Rock Creek Park follows a predictable route with minimal security coverage." Morrison's expression turned to stone. Senator Westbrook chaired the Senate Armed Services Committee and had been investigating irregularities in military contracting. Her assassination would eliminate congressional oversight of exactly the kind of corruption that had enabled the equipment theft. "We have to warn her," Emily said. "And we have to get out of here alive to do it," Morrison replied, already planning their escape route. Emily continued monitoring communications, gathering intelligence about the assassination plan while Morrison prepared their withdrawal from the building. What she discovered made their situation even more desperate. "Master Chief, they have teams positioned at all the standard exit points, including the service tunnel we used to enter." "How many teams total?" At least 6 that I can identify from radio traffic, plus vehicle support outside the facility perimeter. Morrison's expression grew increasingly grim as he calculated their odds of successful escape. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in a facility surrounded by hostile forces who knew exactly where they were. "There is one option," Emily said slowly, her administrative knowledge revealing a possibility that Morrison's tactical training hadn't considered. "What kind of option?" Emily's fingers danced across the communications controls, accessing systems she had helped coordinate, but never operated directly. "I can trigger the facility's emergency evacuation protocol. Fire suppression, security lockdown, automated emergency response. It will create chaos that might give us an escape opportunity." Morrison studied communications equipment with professional appreciation. "Can you do it without triggering alarms that will alert the teams waiting for us?" "The evacuation protocol uses different systems than the security grid. I can make it look like a mechanical malfunction rather than deliberate activation." Emily's hands moved across the control interfaces with growing confidence. 18 months of coordinating emergency drills and safety protocols had given her detailed understanding of the facility's automated response systems. For the first time since this crisis began, her administrative background provided a tactical advantage over military training. "Do it," Morrison decided. Emily activated the emergency protocols with a series of commands that would appear routine to casual observation, but would trigger cascading system responses throughout the facility. Fire suppression systems activated, flooding corridors with inert gas. Security systems defaulted to emergency configurations that prioritized evacuation over containment. Emergency lighting replaced normal illumination, creating visual confusion that would benefit their escape. As chaos erupted throughout Building C7, Morrison grabbed his Barrett M82 sniper rifle from its storage case, the weapon that would soon play a crucial role in their survival. He pressed it into Emily's hands with urgent intensity. "Keep this safe. Trust no one. I'll be back for it." Before Emily could respond, Morrison had vanished into the confusion of the emergency evacuation, leaving her holding a weapon worth more than her former annual salary and the terrible knowledge that a senator would die at dawn unless they could somehow warn her in time. Emily Chun, former administrative coordinator, stood alone in a communications center surrounded by hostile forces, holding a sniper rifle and wondering how her quiet life had led to this moment of absolute clarity about who she really was and what she was capable of becoming. Emily clutched Morrison's Barrett M82 sniper rifle as emergency alarms echoed through Building C7, the weapon's familiar weight triggering memories she'd spent 5 years trying to suppress. The tactical teams. Radio chatter faded into background noise as fragments of her buried past began surfacing with crystalline clarity. She wasn't Emily Chun, civilian administrative coordinator. She had never been Emily Chun. Her real name was Lieutenant Emily Nakamura, former Marine Corps Scout sniper, dishonorably discharged after the Kandahar incident that had cost 3 civilian lives and destroyed her military career. The administrative job at Joint Expeditionary Base Little Creek hadn't been random employment. It had been a carefully chosen cover that allowed her to remain close to military operations while hiding from the consequences of her past. The memories flooded back as she moved through Building C7's darkened corridors, Morrison's rifle in her hands feeling like an extension of her own body. Quantico training ranges where she had consistently outshot male recruits who couldn't accept a woman's superiority with precision weapons. Deployment to Afghanistan, where her confirmed kill count had reached 47 before everything went wrong. The investigation that had revealed the crushing weight of unintended consequences that even perfect military precision couldn't prevent. Emily's transformation from civilian contractor to tactical operative wasn't sudden character development. It was the resurgence of capabilities she had deliberately suppressed for half a decade. Her analytical skills with databases and scheduling systems were applications of intelligence training she had received at Marine Corps Intelligence School. Her pattern recognition abilities had been honed through years of identifying enemy movement and predicting hostile activities. Even her obsessive attention to administrative details reflected the methodical approach to intelligence gathering that had made her one of the Corps' most effective reconnaissance assets. The Kandahar incident haunted every moment of her civilian existence. Emily had been conducting overwatch for a Marine patrol when insurgents had taken positions in a school building. Her orders were clear: neutralize the threat to prevent American casualties. What intelligence hadn't told her was that the school was occupied by displaced civilians seeking shelter from fighting in the surrounding districts. Her first shot had eliminated the primary threat, an insurgent leader coordinating attacks against coalition forces. The second shot had taken out a sniper preparing to engage the Marine patrol. But the third shot, the one that still woke her at night, had gone through a concrete wall that intelligence had assured her was empty, killing a 12-year-old girl who had been hiding behind what she thought was cover. The official investigation had cleared Emily of wrongdoing. The insurgents had deliberately used civilian shelters as fighting positions, knowing that American rules of engagement would make military response difficult. But 3 more civilians had died in the subsequent firefight when insurgents used the chaos to launch coordinated attacks from multiple positions. Emily's precision shooting had saved the Marine patrol, but at a cost that made her subsequent medal ceremony feel like mockery. Morrison's voice crackled through her earpiece, pulling her from the memories. Nakamura, I need you to get to the roof. Sniper overwatch position. The use of her real name confirmed what she had suspected. Morrison had known her true identity from the beginning. Her civilian cover had been compromised not recently, but had never been as complete as she'd believed. Copy that, Emily responded, her voice automatically shifting to the crisp professionalism of military communications. What's the tactical situation? Hutchinson's teams are moving to intercept the senator's security detail before they can alter her morning routine. We have approximately 4 hours before she begins her jog through Rock Creek Park. Emily's mind processed the tactical implications while her body moved automatically toward the building's roof access. 4 hours to prevent an assassination that would eliminate congressional oversight of intelligence operations she had once been part of herself. The roof provided an elevated position, overlooking the facility's perimeter, where Emily could see the extent of the operation mounted against them. At least 12 vehicles were positioned in coordinated patterns that suggested professional surveillance and interdiction capabilities. Hutchinson wasn't just leading a military equipment theft ring. He was commanding a significant paramilitary force with resources that indicated backing from well-funded organizations. Emily's hands moved over the Barrett M82 with muscle memory that transcended her years of administrative work. The weapon had been modified with components she recognized from her CIA training: specialized optics, custom ammunition, stability modifications that extended effective range beyond standard military specifications. Morrison had prepared this rifle specifically for counter-assassination operations at extreme distances. Through the rifle's scope, Emily began identifying targets with the systematic approach that had made her one of the Marine Corps' most effective snipers. Vehicle commanders, communications operators, overwatch positions, escape route coverage. The tactical picture became clear as she cataloged threats and opportunities with professional precision. Her earpiece carried Morrison's voice from his position inside the building. Nakamura, I've got confirmation from CIA control. The senator's assassination is scheduled for 0630 hours, but there are 5 additional targets throughout Washington, D.C. This operation is designed to eliminate the entire congressional investigation into black-budget intelligence programs. Emily felt cold understanding wash over her. The conspiracy extended far beyond Senator Westbrook to encompass systematic elimination of legislative oversight that protected democratic accountability of intelligence operations. Stopping the assassination required more than preventing a single death. It demanded dismantling an entire network dedicated to eliminating congressional authority over CIA activities. "What are my orders?" Emily asked, though she already understood. What would be required? Neutralize the command structure. Hutchinson's tactical teams will abort if their leadership is eliminated. Emily's scope found Hutchinson's position in the primary command vehicle, where he was coordinating the operation through secure communications. At 800 meters distance with variable wind conditions, the shot would be challenging but well within her demonstrated capabilities. One trigger pull could decapitate the entire operation and prevent multiple political assassinations. But as Emily's finger moved to the trigger, the weight of Kandahar returned with crushing force. The 12-year-old girl who had died because Emily had trusted intelligence assessments and followed orders without questioning the human cost of precision violence. The medal ceremony where she had been honored for actions that had saved American lives while ending innocent ones. "Morrison, I can't take the shot. Nakamura, we're out of time." Without tactical leadership, Hutchinson's teams won't be able to coordinate the assassinations. Emily's hands trembled as she fought between her duty to prevent multiple murders and her personal commitment to never again pull a trigger that might end an innocent life. The rifle's scope showed Hutchinson clearly, but also revealed civilian personnel in the command vehicle who might be coerced participants rather than willing conspirators. "There has to be another way, Emily." Morrison's voice carried understanding rather than impatience. "You left the Marines because you couldn't accept that precision violence sometimes produces unintended consequences. But refusing to act when action is necessary also produces consequences. Senator Westbrook and 5 other people will die if you don't take this shot." Emily realized that her trauma from Kandahar had created a different kind of moral trap. Her refusal to risk causing unintended harm had become a guarantee that intended harm would occur unopposed. The girl who had died in Afghanistan would not be honored by allowing others to die in Washington. Through her scope, Emily watched Hutchinson issuing orders that would result in multiple political assassinations designed to undermine American democracy itself. Her choice wasn't between causing harm and preventing it. Her choice was between accepting responsibility for necessary action or accepting responsibility for preventable tragedy. Emily's breathing steadied as she applied the shooting techniques that had made her one of the military's most effective snipers. Wind calculation, range estimation, target tracking, the mechanical precision of marksmanship that could be applied with moral clarity when the alternative was allowing greater harm to occur. Her first shot disabled the command vehicle's communications equipment, cutting off Hutchinson's ability to coordinate with his distributed teams. The second shot eliminated the vehicle's engine, preventing escape. The third shot, fired with the same precision that had once accidentally killed a child, struck Hutchinson's weapon hand with exact force necessary to incapacitate without killing. Emily's earpiece immediately carried confused radio traffic. As Hutchinson's tactical teams lost coordination and began withdrawing from their positions. Without central command and communications, the assassination operation collapsed into individual units seeking extraction rather than target elimination. Outstanding shooting, Nakamura. All teams are withdrawing. Senator Westbrook will live to continue her investigation. Emily remained in position as Morrison coordinated with CIA response teams who were moving to capture fleeing conspirators. Her transformation was complete. She was no longer Emily Chun, the civilian contractor who had hidden from her past, nor was she Lieutenant Emily Nakamura, the traumatized veteran who couldn't reconcile duty with conscience. She was someone new, a person who could apply deadly skills with moral certainty when the alternative was allowing greater evil to proceed unopposed. Someone who understood that preventing harm sometimes required risking it, and that refusing all action was itself a form of action with moral consequences. As dawn broke over Virginia, Emily began the careful process of field stripping Morrison's Barrett M82, preparing the weapon for return to its owner. The rifle had served its purpose, but more importantly, so had she. The quiet woman who had fixed training schedules had discovered she could fix much larger problems when circumstances demanded it. Morrison joined her on the roof as federal agents secured the facility and arrested the remaining conspirators. His expression carried satisfaction, mixed with something that might have been paternal pride. "What happens now?" Emily asked. "Now you decide who you want to be. Emily Chun can remain officially dead, and Lieutenant Emily Nakamura can return to active CIA operations. Or you can choose something entirely different." Emily looked out over the facility where she had spent 18 months hiding from herself and her capabilities. The woman who had once coordinated training schedules had just prevented multiple political assassinations and preserved democratic oversight of intelligence operations. She had proven that her skills could serve purposes larger than her personal trauma. "I think," Emily said slowly, "I'd like to find work that uses my analytical abilities and tactical training to prevent problems rather than react to them." Morrison's smile suggested he had anticipated her answer. "I know just the position. CIA's Counterterrorism Analysis Division needs someone with your unique combination of database expertise and operational experience, preventing attacks before they develop rather than responding after they occur." Emily nodded, understanding that her transformation was complete. She had moved from hiding her past to integrating it, from avoiding responsibility to accepting it, from being someone who had been damaged by difficult choices to someone who could make difficult choices with moral clarity. The invisible woman, who had maintained targets on a military range, had discovered she could hit targets that mattered far more than scoring rings. And in doing so, she had found herself. Senator Catherine Westbrook completed her morning jog through Rock Creek Park without incident, never knowing how close she had come to becoming a casualty in a war between democratic accountability and intelligence autonomy. Congressional oversight of CIA operations would continue, protected by a former Marine sniper who had learned that some shots were worth taking when the alternative was allowing democracy itself to become a target. Emily Chun had ended where Lieutenant Emily Nakamura began again. But the woman who emerged from that transformation was someone entirely new, someone who understood that the greatest precision was not in hitting targets, but in choosing which targets deserved to be hit. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.